Welcome, everybody, back to Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. We are on episode 54. It's our first show back from the All-Star break after the Bruins played their first game back from the All-Star break. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about today, and most of it's not good. So we'll see how this goes, but as you can see, Danny is back again. Danny, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming on, doing the show again. Great to have you here. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Bruins news to get into today.
We complain when there is no news, and yet we often complain when there is news. So it's the best of both worlds. I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man, of course. Before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them, so I want to give a big shout out to everybody there for all the support. Really, really appreciate it. And also, turn your attention down to the description of the video because we have 3 links down there. If you guys are in the market for apparel, whether it's Boston Bruins, NHL from any team, or college, NCAA, it's all there in the description. Wide variety of products, all different things to check out. So it'd really mean a lot if you could use those links down there for your shopping. And again, top link is Boston Bruins apparel. Second link is NHL from any team around the league. And the third link is for college. So I guess we'll get right into it here. Danny, lot of bad news coming last night for the Bruins with regards to some of their biggest names. Tuca Rask, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, all in the news for not good reasons. And I guess we're gonna have to start with Brad Marchand because I think this is probably the biggest one. Lost his head at the end of the game against Pittsburgh last night and now is facing a lengthy suspension after punching Tristan Jarry in the head and then swinging his stick at him as well, which I think that's the one that they're really going to get him for, is the stick swing. But this was just stupid, and now he's already been offered an in-person hearing, which means 5+ game suspension. And this could be a long suspension coming, given Brad Marchand's history.
Yeah, his history certainly doesn't work in his favor, and I guess they say if you're going to go down swinging. But all jokes aside, this is very concerning for the Bruins. They're already having trouble generating consistent scoring with Marchand on the ice. It seems like he's been really the only consistent scorer for the Bruins this year. Now with him out and the ship's starting to sink a little bit, this is not a good development for the Bruins, and they're going to need to have players step up. It seems like we've been saying that all season, but now more than ever with their playoff hopes and positioning on the line, this is definitely a major loss.
Yeah, big time. I mean, we're looking at, some tough games coming up here for the Bruins. They got Carolina on Thursday. They got the New York Rangers next Tuesday. They've got the New York Islanders next Thursday. So, of their next 5 games, 3 of those are pretty tough matchups. I know the Islanders aren't having a good year this year, but they always play the Bruins really tough.
They do.
They got Colorado coming up on the 21st. So there's another tough game in February. I mean, if Marchand's gone for, 8 games, something like that, he's going to miss the rest of the month pretty much. They've got some tough matchups that they're going to have to play without him.
Yeah, and, you just mentioned that schedule. That does not work in their favor. The Bruins are going to have to really rely on their secondary scoring. Thankfully, it's been better as of late, not great. So I'd love to see more players like Jake DeBrusk, who's been on a little bit of not a hot streak, but he's been playing better as of late, really step up. And, guys like Taylor Hall, and, we're still going to rely on, Pasta and things like that. But having Brad Marchand out, he's kind of the engine that makes everything go for this offense. And with him out, it may be a long stretch here for Boston.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, it's like the last guy that you could afford to lose out of the lineup, and other than maybe Charlie McAvoy, because that defense would implode if they lost McAvoy. But um, yeah, Marchand's like that one guy that you couldn't afford to lose like this, and now for him to go out and just do something that was just so unnecessary and dumb, it really puts the Bruins in a bad spot because I think we're looking at a pretty lengthy suspension here, and he's gonna be gone for some really big games for this Bruins team, and now you don't have him, who's your best offensive player, out of the lineup now, suspended. And then Patrice Bergeron also got injured in last night's game in the third period. He left and did not return. Haven't really heard any details or anything yet. We're recording this on Wednesday, the day after. So haven't really heard any details yet as far as how long he might be out, what the injury is, all of that. But that didn't look good. I mean, anytime that he went awkwardly into the boards after a collision with Sidney Crosby, and obviously didn't come back to the game. So when you're out like that for the rest of the game, that leads me to believe it's something on the serious side. And if they have no Marchand and no Bergeron in the lineup, I mean, how's this team gonna win a game? Certainly not gonna beat Carolina like that. But how, even when they're playing teams like Ottawa, how are they gonna win a game without those two guys in the lineup?
They're not, and it's really sort of sad seeing everything kind of crumble like this because when you look, like we talked about last week, when you look at this team, this might be one of the last years with this core group, and obviously there's still a lot of the season to go, and we have the playoffs, but this is a really rough stretch that could put them into a tough spot and ultimately affect their playoff positioning. I mean, you've said it yourself, these races are tight. There's no room for error, and the Bruins are just having the worst possible situations come at them at the worst possible time right now. It's like an avalanche. When it rains, it pours, as they say.
Yeah, it's certainly pouring right now. Now, the good news for the Bruins is that they have a pretty good cushion in the wild card spot. So like they're in the second wild card spot right now. They've got 55 points through 44 games. The first team outside of a wild card spot is the Detroit Red Wings, who are at 46 points, which are 9 points behind the Bruins. And Detroit's already played 47 games. So Boston does have 3 games in hand on the Red Wings. So the good news is that those top 8 teams that are in playoff spots right now in the Eastern Conference have separated themselves from the bottom 8 teams who are not in a playoff spot. So I don't think I don't think yet we have to worry about, dropping out of a playoff spot, but
Yeah.
you're not going to catch the top teams in this division. You're not going to catch Toronto, who's on a 6-game winning streak and 8-2 in their last 10. Tampa Bay, who's 7-2-1 in their last 10, or Florida, who's 7-3 in their last 10. Boston's not catching any of those teams with the way that things are going right now.
And you want to know a common theme about all those teams? They either have young, skilled players or they have skilled players to go along with depth. And that
hmm
is something the Bruins do not have right now, and it's going to show. I really do think it's going to show. And
The
it's not going to be
Bruins
pretty.
don't have enough skilled players and they don't have enough depth. They're literally lacking behind those teams in almost every area.
Good young players. They don't like. It's one thing to say like, oh, this guy can be a good third line player, but teams like Florida, Barkov, and they're a young group, but they fit together well. They've been developed well,
Yep.
hint hint hint, and they've drafted well, and you're seeing the results of them having a really great season, and that's development and production out of the young players is something the Bruins don't have, which is why with this core group kind of going down right now, and Bergeron and Marchand with his potential suspension, that's why we're kind of worried right now because we don't have that young depth to rely on like these other teams do. And it's really a sign, and not to go on a little tangent here, but the league is getting younger and they're getting more skilled players and they're getting faster and they're able to develop. We saw this last year. The Bruins haven't done it, and now it's coming back to bite them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, right now, the playoff matchup for the Bruins in the first round would be the Florida Panthers.
Yeah.
That
Um,
that would not go well. Florida
no.
is an absolute juggernaut this year, scoring over 4 goals a game. I think that series would be over quick. Yeah, but Boston just, I mean, they're sitting in that second wild card spot, and now, with everything going on, I don't think they're really moving from that spot.
No.
And that's going to lead to a really tough first round matchup because you're either going to get whoever wins the Atlantic Division, which right now looks like it's going to be Florida, or you're maybe Tampa Bay, or you're going to get whoever wins the Metro Division, and that's looking like it's either going to be Carolina or Pittsburgh, who's the team that literally just beat you last night, and you went off the rails against at the end. If you're Brad Marchand, like no matter who they play in the first round, it's going to be a better team.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a very, very difficult matchup that honestly I don't see the Bruins beating any of those teams I just mentioned in a playoff series.
No, and this would be a sad way for this Bruins group to go out. I will say though, if the Bruins play the Panthers and the Panthers beat the Bruins, obviously, yes, I'll be sad that the Bruins lost, but I really do like that Florida Panthers team, so I will still have a vested interest in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But you're right. If the teams that we play in the first round are better than us, then we would have no shot at a potential second round. And I'm confident in saying no shot because even when you look at the playoffs with everybody healthy, it goes back to that depth and young talent, and the Bruins just don't have that. And it's frustrating because I feel like, we've been spinning on this hamster wheel for goodness knows how long.
Mhm.
And now it's going to show up, I think, with these, um, with the potential suspension, and we still don't know about the Bergeron injury, but it's going to slow him down a bit, I bet.
Yeah, definitely. So just comparing like Boston to Florida here, who would be their first round matchup right now. Brad Marchand leads the Bruins in points with 49. Now he's going to be missing some games. So David Pasternak's right behind him with 45. Those are the only two Bruins with 40-plus points. If you look at Florida, Jonathan Huberdeau leads the Florida Panthers with 64 points. He
I
also
love to
leads the
watch him play.
NHL in points. Sam Reinhart, Aaron Ekblad, and Alexander Barkov also all have 40-plus points. And then two more Bruins have 30-plus points. You've got Bergeron at 35. He looks like he could be out with an injury now. You've got Taylor Hall at 31. Those are the only other two Bruins with 30-plus points. Florida, on top of their 4 guys with 40-plus, they have an additional 4 guys with 30-plus in Carter Verhaeghe, Anthony Duclair, Anton Lundell, and Sam Bennett. So Florida is an offensive powerhouse. And quite honestly, I do not trust the Bruins goaltending or defense, especially at all, to shut down an offensive team like the Florida Panthers.
Florida is very well built for the future. You just laid it out right there. They have depth, they have multiple players who could score, and they have solid goaltending. I mean, it's all things right now that the Bruins do not have. And, when you look at who'd you say the top scorers were? Pasta and Marchand, right?
Yes.
Other teams know that too. Other teams look at that stat sheet and say, "Oh, okay, Pastrnak and Marchand, let's rough them up because we don't have to worry about any of the other players
Yeah.
on the Bruins team really making as big an impact." We saw it in last year's playoffs. The first line was out a ton because A, that was the only line that could score with consistency, and B, those were the star playmakers. We didn't have depth to really bring another line in and say, "Oh, look, we can surprise, defenses and goalies and this. We can get consistent production out of this line as well." teams game plan for the first line, and they're going to game plan for the first line again. And I see another early playoff exit in the future. I really do.
Yeah, no, I honestly agree with you. So I'm looking at Taylor Hall right now, who 44 games played. He has 10 goals, 21 assists for 31 points. I mean, that's fine. Not great, not terrible, but he's making $6 million a year. Now I'm over here looking at Florida, and they have Anton Lundell, who's 20 years old, that they just drafted a couple years ago, who has almost identical numbers. He has 10 goals, 22 assists for 32 points in 43 games, and is a plus 25 on the season at 20 years old. I mean, talk about a great draft pick there for the Florida Panthers. Also, they picked up Anthony Duclair. He's got 19 goals and 35 points. Carter Verhaeghe, who they brought in from Tampa Bay a couple years ago or before last season, he's got 37 points in 46 games. Like they're getting production out of guys who aren't making a lot of money, who aren't really huge household names. And these guys have the same or better point production than Taylor Hall for the Bruins, who's making $6 million and is supposed to be one of their star players.
It all goes back to scouting and development, and we haven't been able to do that in a long, 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 long time. We really have not been good at scouting, drafting, and developing. We've been good at throwing money at people and hoping they work for the best. I mean, Taylor Hall is certainly not a bust, or he's not been a bad player for the Bruins by any means, but we've been forced to throw money at names and veterans because there is nothing available on the farm, so to speak. And it all goes back to the scouting and development. I remember doing a show with you last summer after the playoffs, and we talked about this exact same thing. And the scouting department needs to be overhauled, and there shouldn't be a huge gap in between development, like we're seeing with the Bruins and other teams. I mean, look at the New York Islanders in the playoffs last year. Like I said, look at them now.
Mm-hmm.
They have players that they've developed, and they've been able to draft and scout. And it sounds so easy and simple, but clearly it's not, since the Bruins haven't been able to do that. And I know I'm ranting, but it's clear as day, and they've done nothing to fix it. Nothing at all. And other teams are leapfrogging them with players that are making essentially, $5 in comparison to like $6 million,
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely crazy to me. I mean, we saw this happening, and nothing has been done to fix it. Everything that we're seeing happening right now, me and you called on the show last year, 2 years ago, and it's still the same darn problem. And
Yep.
I'm tired of it. I really am.
Yeah, so I'm going through the Bruins roster right now and their stat sheet and everything, and the only two of the Bruins players that have double-digit points this season. So 13 Bruins have 10-plus points on the year. Only two of them were recent draft picks by the Bruins, because Pasternak's going back a while, Bergeron obviously going way, way back, Marchand's going way back now too. But recent draft picks, like 2015 on, 2015 through now, the only Bruins players in their lineup who were drafted by the Bruins, who have from 2015 till now, who have double-digit points this season, are Jake DeBrusk with 15 points and Charlie McAvoy with 28 points. And the only Bruins draft picks from 2015 on who are having any sort of impact in the lineup, other than, obviously Brandon Carlo is good defensively, and he was a 2015 second-round pick, but Carlo only has 6 points on the season. He's not having an offensive impact at all, but even if you throw Carlo in there, only 3 Bruins draft picks from 2015 on are having any sort of impact offensively for this team. Obviously, Swayman in goal is a different story, but it's just the point that, all of these drafts that they've had, that literally nothing's come out of.
Yeah, and, I don't know necessarily about his situation now, but last time I checked, Jake DeBrusk doesn't even want to be here.
Yeah,
so,
he's still pending trade requests.
So it sounds like we're beating a dead horse. It really does. But this this argument, we're seeing the Bruins' failures fall come right in their faces, I guess you could say. And, we've seen it every single year in some sort of capacity. And now we're seeing it again. Now that we may lose two of our top players, we don't have a ton of depth to rely on. And this all goes back to scouting and development. And you just mentioned the Florida Panthers have been able to get it done with, smaller salary players. And they've been able to find pieces and production that fit. And I don't care if, we get another big name. If he doesn't fit, then he's not going to work in the Bruins system. And it all goes back to scouting and development. I'll just keep saying it until it happens, and I'll probably be saying it on this show till we're 75.
Yeah.
But it all goes back to scouting and development, and that's the reason why the Panthers are where they are, and that's the reason why the Bruins are in the hole that they're in.
Yeah, nobody from the Bruins 2018 draft till now has even played an NHL game.
That is concerning.
2018 draft, I mean, they didn't have a first-round pick that year, so they only had a second, third, fourth, sixth, and seventh, but nobody's played an NHL game. 2019, nobody's played an NHL game. 2020, I mean, Mason Lowry looks like a really good young defensive prospect, but he's at Ohio State right now. He's certainly not NHL ready yet. And then obviously last year, they just picked him. Nobody's playing from last year's draft. But even just looking at how many teams around the league are getting production from guys from their 2018 draft, their 2019 draft, their 2017
a
draft.
Ton.
So many teams around the league are getting production from guys that they took in those drafts, and the Bruins aren't. Now, 2017, Urho Vakanainen's played a little bit this year before obviously getting injured in the Seattle game. But he's only played 29 career games. And then Jeremy Swayman is the big one from 2017 that is actually, having an impact. But Jack Studnicka is still down in Providence, hasn't broken into the NHL yet as a full-time NHLer. Vakanainen is still on that line of, he only got called up because he had defensemen out. They're not getting production from those guys. They're not getting production from those drafts. From 2016, they got McAvoy and Frederick in the first round that year. McAvoy obviously has become a star defenseman, but Frederick has been disappointing.
I wouldn't consider Frederick a first-round pick. He's a decent player, but that just drafting Trent Frederick in the first round, the Bruins tend to reach, and this is something we've discussed last year too, but again, It's coming back up again. The Bruins tend to reach. When I turn on the NHL draft, right, and the announcers and the analysts go, "Who is that?" when the Bruins pick, that doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. Or when they say, "Wow, that's a reach," that doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as much as they think they do, the analysts don't know everything. But when when there are questions surrounding the Bruins' first-round picks and they seem like reaches, or there's a lot of head scratching going on, that falls back again to the scouting and development department. And, we said this last year, but I'm going to say it again. The Bruins need to draft well this summer. I mean, and you talk about Urho Vakanainen in 2017 draft, it's now 2022.
Yeah.
So we're, 5 years away from that? It's hard to believe. I feel old. But it's just crazy to me. It really is crazy to me. They need a scouting overhaul of some sort, and they just for whatever reason can't draft. And then they throw money at big name players who may underperform.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a recipe for disaster. And now we're seeing it when the core of our roster that has performed well over the years is starting to fade a little bit. All of these things are coming back to bite the Bruins. And me and you both saw this coming, and it was only a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I could go on and on about the drafting.
Yeah.
That's I guess more of an off.
Maybe that will be a summer show.
Yeah, that's more of an off-season kind of talk. But Man, it's just aggravating that the
It
Bruins are in
is.
this position where they're squandering the last years of Patrice Bergeron and the last years of Brad Marchand being an elite player. And they're wasting it because this isn't a good enough team to win a Stanley Cup. And now we're seeing, you know, we went a little way off topic there, but circling back to just, having Bergeron and Marchand out of the lineup, the reason that, well, we don't know for sure what's going on with Bergeron, but assuming he's going to miss some time, I hope he doesn't. But if he's out and Marchand's out at the same time, Boston's lineup is junk at that point.
Yep.
Literal junk. And I think one of the, how we get into the whole draft conversation is that you lose those two players and you've got nothing to replace them. And that goes back to their drafting and development and the fact that they have nobody that can step up into those roles. I mean, they're playing Erik Haula as their second line center. Dude had like 20 points last year. Are you kidding me? That's your second line center? He should be on your third line, fourth line on a real good team depending on the lineup, but I mean, it's just they don't have anything beyond. They're not nearly deep enough. They don't have anything beyond those few top guys, and it's continuing to come back to haunt them.
And people will blame Bruce Cassidy for putting out these lineups, but he really can't do a whole lot else.
No, it's the roster.
I mean,
Who's he gonna play?
Yeah.
I mean, his choices for second line center are Erik Haula, Charlie Coyle, or Tomas Nosek.
Yeah, and that's not exactly an all-star group right there. No disrespect to any of them, but that's just the truth. And honestly, I think it goes beyond, just scouting. I think, Don Sweeney's had some hit or miss years, but Cam Neely, I feel like Cam Neely kind of hides in the background and we don't hear much about him, but I'm starting to question whether he is the right person to move the Bruins in a different direction, because a different direction is inevitable. I mean, we're seeing the end of the big three, so to speak, and we need personnel that can develop talent, can make good acquisitions, and can have a good sense of where the game is going.
Yep.
And right now, I don't have that trust with this group.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, you make a good point about Neely kind of hiding in the background. I don't really know, like, what his, how much control he has, like, what part of the decision-making process falls on him? Like, what are the decisions that he's making? Like, is Sweeney the guy that has the final say in signings and trades and all of that, or is Neely heavily involved in that kind of stuff? Like, I don't know exactly like what his role is and what he does on a day-to-day basis and on a decision-making basis, but he definitely, if he's involved in making these roster decisions as much as Sweeney is, then he deserves as much blame as Sweeney does as well.
I mean, he's the president, so, he definitely deserves some of the blame, just because you would think a guy like Cam Neely, who was a great hockey player and a great, skilled player and fun to watch, would say, okay, this current group is not working. We need to shake things up, and we need to change things up, and not necessarily make a splash, but we need to look at ways that we can maximize the talent that we have on the ice while putting pieces together that fit. And right now, that's not happening. And, I'll be interested to see what happens. I mean, can Sweeney help rebuild the Bruins once this year is over? Because, quite frankly, I think after this year, you may see a shift in the way the organization goes, the direction, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. I mean, I don't think there's. I mean, what are they going to do next season? Come back with the same roster? You're going to be one and done in the playoffs again, if you even make the playoffs next year. And I think, honestly, Detroit's coming. Like, I think Detroit is on the rise, and Detroit's coming. So they're going to be trying to take a playoff spot. They're going to have to take it from somebody, and I think, to me, Boston would be one of those teams that I'd be worried about dropping out next year of not even being a playoff team, unless they make some major changes, because this group isn't going to do it. They're just not. they're going to have to make some moves. They're going to, whether it's at the trade deadline, to try and salvage this year and try and make them a legitimate contender this year, they're going to have to make some moves. Or if whether it's going into next year to try and have a bounce back season next year, this team as it sits right now is not winning a Stanley Cup. Absolutely not.
Absolutely
not nearly good enough compared to some other teams in the East.
No, and when you look at Detroit, it's really interesting because I'm sure many of the older listeners and even us to a certain extent remember the late 90s, early 2000s Detroit teams where it seemed like they made the playoffs for basically every season. I believe
They
they
did.
had
They made it for 25 straight
25
years.
years, 25 straight years, and then they went through a little bit of a lull, and then they rebuild, and now they're on the rise again.
Yep.
And is Steve Yzerman still an executive there?
He's their GM.
Yeah.
He's the best GM in the NHL.
And he's been that way for a long time. Why? Because he's been able to draft and identify talent. And even when the Red Wings went through a little bit of a rough period, you know, I would have confidence in him leading the Bruins, just hypothetically speaking.
Yes.
Like, I would have confidence that he would be able to get the job done and lead the Bruins back in a rebuild. I don't have confidence with this current group, and it just goes to show how much good drafting and, you know, again, I'm saying it a ton of times, but identifying talent and development just shows when that happens and it works, it can lead to quick success.
Yeah, absolutely. Stevie Y's the best GM in the league.
Yeah.
He built Tampa Bay into what they are now. Then he went back to Detroit and was like, well, I'm going to go where I played my entire career and build them back, because Detroit was, I mean, last place team when he took over there, and they're already getting back, pushing to within the next couple years be a legitimate threat again. So I would love, I mean, I don't think Steve's ever going to leave Detroit just because, you know, he was the captain there and like he played his whole career there. It was, you know, he is Detroit, but I would love somebody like that to be the GM of the Bruins, because you're right, I don't have confidence in Don Sweeney to go through a rebuild and get this team back. If they fall off to where they're not a playoff team, I don't trust Don Sweeney to get them back into the playoffs or rebuild a team like that. I don't.
And I mean, look, we just had to look up what Cam Neely's role was. So
well, I know like his title,
right
but
there,
I don't know what he does on like as far as decision making.
We had to figure out like what his title was and like what his role on this team is, and we still don't know. I mean, we know he's the president, but we don't know what he does.
Yeah, so. I don't know, like, because some teams the president is kind of, you know, like steps back and lets the GM be the GM, and then on other teams the president is much more heavily involved and has like the final say on things. So the GM can go to him with a trade idea or signing or something, but the president ends up having to sign off it at the end. So I don't know what the dynamic is in that front office between Sweeney and Neely, and who the burden of these decisions and the consequences of these decisions should fall on.
I'm thinking it's more like Neely signs off, but Sweeney does a lot of these deals, just because even when you hear a report like the Bruins traded for player X on the news, you would think you would hear Cam Neely's name a little bit more in those types of situations, but you rarely never do.
It's all Sweeney, yeah. So
again,
I don't know, but
I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless for these Bruins. I don't know. I mean, they had their window, and the window's closed, and you know they had some really great teams over the years, and they were only able to get one cup, and that one cup was quite frankly because of Tim Thomas.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just the Bruins have been looked at as an elite organization, but within the organization, whether it be personnel management, development, drafting, whatever, they haven't been able to do a solid enough job. In the meantime, other teams are lapping them in that respect, and it's just frustrating because I wonder when we're going to be able to see a Stanley Cup contending team again.
This team reminds me a little bit of the Anaheim Ducks through most of the 2010s. Mm-hmm. Like the Ducks won the Cup in 2007 They had a veteran team that year, but they had some young pieces, like especially Ryan Getzlaf, Corey
Mhm.
Perry, Bobby Ryan came into the picture, I think, right after that. They had some young pieces to build around, but they won the Cup in 2007 with a very veteran team. Kind of the way that the Bruins won the Cup in 2011 with a very veteran team, but then still had those few pieces to build around moving forward. And then Anaheim went through most of the 2010s as a contender. They made multiple conference finals. They were in the playoffs every year, but they never won another cup. In the Bruins from 2011 on, they've been a perennial contender. They've been in the playoffs most of the years, but they've never won another cup. And then eventually time ran out for Anaheim. They've gone through that rebuild process where they've dropped down and they're just starting to come back up out of that rebuild this year. But I feel like that's what's coming for the Bruins is that drop down the way that Anaheim did, and then they're going to have to try and build back out of it.
And like you said a little bit ago, I don't think that this current management group can build back out effectively. So that raises a whole other set of questions. But I don't know. I just think this was a really squandered opportunity. When you look at the 2011 Stanley Cup, one of the young pieces was Brad Marchand. And
Yep.
that Stanley Cup was now 11 years ago. And we still haven't been able to get over that hump. We came close in 2013. We
Yep.
came close in 2019. What a heartbreaker that was.
Yeah.
And
2019 was the one that I still am irritated by because they should have won that series.
because I don't think they would have won had they won in 2013 and they had to go back to Chicago after that. I don't think they would have won in
No,
Chicago.
Chicago was the best team in 2013. Like I'm not upset about. Obviously, I wanted the Bruins to win, but
Yeah.
that loss doesn't eat away at me because I think the best team won, and that those Chicago teams back then were just absolutely unreal.
They,
2019 still bothers me because the Bruins should have won that series.
they easily should have won that series. And, it just seemed like at certain points the Blues wanted it more.
Yep.
And then you had Tuca Rask kind of not coming up clutch, for lack of a more gentler term. And it's just so frustrating. I mean, you look at this organization, we're always pegged as one of the best in hockey, but
Mm-hmm.
we haven't been able to get over that hump in quite a while. I mean, sure, if you count Stanley Cup appearances as getting over the hump, we just had one in 2019, but at the end of the day, it's wins.
Not good
And
enough.
yeah, it's not good enough. And even Chicago, who is going through a little bit of a rebuild now, they were able to maximize the veteran players that they had
Yeah.
and were able to win a couple of cups in
They
a
got
short
3.
window. Yeah,
So
they got three. So, I mean, it's just so frustrating. You look at the teams that have won, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they've won cups, they're onto the rebuild stage, and now they look to be on the rise again. We haven't won cups. We're kind of getting towards the rebuild stage, and we're stuck. I mean, it's
again the parallels to Anaheim through the last like 10 years. I think very similar to the Anaheim Ducks. Just not able to finish anything off and get that cup. Then the Bruins haven't been able to. They've been a perennial playoff team, but they haven't been able to get that cup. Anaheim went through the same thing. And I think that's where Boston's headed, is that they're going to have to go through that rebuild now, coming pretty soon, because Bergeron's 36 years old and in the last year of his contract. Once he's gone, this team, you're going to be looking at major changes at that point. So, um, yeah, it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating because, I would take if you told me that the Bruins put 3 cup wins together, but then was going to have to blow the team up because of the salary cap and go through a 5-year rebuild. I will gladly take 5
yeah,
years of being absolutely terrible for 3 Stanley Cups. That's
absolutely.
basically what happened with Chicago, is that they got their 3 cups and then they've gone downhill and they had to, eventually, completely rework that lineup. But they got 3 Stanley Cups out of it, so that's worth it. Tampa Bay, unfortunately, because of the salary cap, is going to be heading there eventually. Like, they got their back-to-back cups. We'll see what they do this year. They're still a very good year this year. Eventually Tampa Bay is going to have to kind of, dip down and go through that rebuild process again. But they got their cups out of it. The Bruins didn't. They got one, and that one seems like it's not enough because they probably should have had at least 2 or 3. And it's really disappointing and frustrating because this, for the last decade, they've had a team that could do it, and they missed their opportunities, and now I don't think they have a team that can do it.
And again, when you look at a team like Tampa Bay, we defeated them in 2011 in one of the playoff series. That Tampa
Yeah.
Bay was in the playoffs. Now they're winning Stanley Cups. When you look at a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins, they were able to win a Stanley Cup in '09, was it?
'09 and then back-to-back in 16-17.
And they're still, a perennial playoff team.
Yep.
Even when you look at a team like, Washington, for instance, they won a Stanley Cup in 2020, and was it 2020? Or was it
2018.
2018? 2018, and, they've been a perennial playoff contender. So there's been this mark of consistency with all the teams I just mentioned, and, the Bruins just have not had that. Even Tampa Bay 10 years ago, they were close to getting to the Cup, and they were able to finish the job, 10 years later. But they were consistent in developing and drafting, and that set them up for success.
Washington's another team with only 1 cup.
Yeah.
Similar to Boston, through this entire Ovechkin era where they've been a perennial playoff team like the Bruins have been,
Yeah.
They're only got 1 cup. 2018 was it for them. And I think I know Washington fans are disappointed with the fact that they've only gotten 1. And, they're another team. They're in the other wild card spot in the East. So you're looking at Boston and Washington being in kind of similar spots where they're both wild card teams now and kind of on the downswing. I don't think Washington's winning the Cup this year. They're, to me, similar to the Bruins. They're a good team. They're not a great team.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring up that parallel because it is so true. And, it's really sort of mystifying when you look at some of the names that have passed through TD Garden, and the Bruins only have 1 cup to show for it. I mean, it really is crazy. And same thing with Washington. I mean, you look at some of the star players that they've had, and they don't have much to show for it either. And Alexander Ovechkin is not a player that's going to be able to show up at every single draft every year.
No, certainly not.
So I think they kind of wasted his career too. I mean, a little bit. He was able to put up great numbers individually. Obviously, he's one of the best players ever. But, as an organization, Washington just hasn't been able to deliver, and Boston hasn't been able to deliver.
And Anaheim wasn't able to through that entire stretch of their greatness too. I think it kind of shows how hard it is to win a Stanley Cup, and how difficult it truly is to win that trophy.
And how much off-ice factors in the general manager room and things like that it takes to win the Stanley Cup. It's a lot more than just the product you see on the ice. It's cumulative moves and things that happen off the ice in terms of contract signings, drafting, free agent signings, extensions that all play a part in that. And it's not an easy game. I mean, I don't know if I could do it. I'm sitting here bashing everybody, but I don't know if I could do it. But it is really just kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, sure. It's certainly not easy. It's certainly not easy. It's very hard to put a true cup-winning team on the ice, and you need a lot of moves to go your way. You need a lot of things on and off the ice to go your way to be able to win it. But it just feels like Boston has had teams that could have won it and didn't, and they missed those chances because at this point, I don't really think they have much of a chance to win one this year unless we see some monster move at the trade deadline that completely shifts everything. But I mean, I still think Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Pittsburgh, they're all better than the Bruins.
Yeah, and I hope that we have to eat crow at the end of June somehow, and we're all very wrong, and I will admit to that. And
that'd be great. I'd love to be wrong about this.
I would love to be wrong, and you never hear me say that, but I would love to be wrong. about this,
I would
but I
too,
just
but
don't
I
see it.
just don't think I am.
No, I don't see it either. Although John Duncan predictions, for those who don't know, they can flip flop. So whenever there's a John Duncan prediction, that always leaves me a glimmer of hope. So if nothing else today, when you stop listening to this episode, leave with a glimmer of hope.
They've probably already stopped as we've been bashing the Bruins for the last half an hour.
Whose
But
soapbox is this? Theirs or ours, right?
yeah. But anyway, so obviously we talked about Marchand and the stick swing and the likely lengthy suspension coming for him. Bergeron getting injured in the Pittsburgh game, that could be devastating if he is out at the same time as Marchand and has to miss time. Hopefully not too long of time, but we don't know right as of now on Wednesday what the timetable on that injury is going to be. But the last piece of news that dropped last night was about Tuca Rask. So obviously, going back a few weeks, Rask signs with the Bruins, going to try and take one more shot at it, one more shot at the Cup. And I said at the time that this was going to be Tuca's last year anyway. I figured that this was going to be his one last chance to try and go and get one. And then he got injured, and he hadn't played for the past couple of weeks, and he's been injured, and they were saying lower body injury. And when you're coming off of major surgery, like Rask got this offseason, it's never good when a couple weeks back into playing, you hear that they're already injured again with a lower body injury. So now it looks like he's done. Like he's going to retire. Again, this isn't official yet, but it was first reported by Fluto Shinzawa. And then, obviously it got talked about more and more over the course of the night, last night and into this morning, where it looks like Rask is likely done. He's stopping his comeback attempt, and he's going to announce his retirement within the next week or so, which obviously that's... once again, plays a big role here in the Bruins' overall depth and goal and their goaltending situation as a whole, because now it's going to be Ullmark and Swayman again. No Rask in the picture. And pretty unfortunate news for Tuca Rask. You certainly didn't want his career to end this way. But this is just kind of another big happening here.
This is a big happening here, and as much as I, bash Tuukka Rask and whatever, I can't imagine what he's going through right now. As an athlete, you never want to hang up the cleats, skates, whatever it is, and that competitive fire will always burn in you, and a lot of times that takes over. You kind of, and I've seen, my fellow football players do this. You see that competitive fire kind of take over, and you think you can and you think you can do it, and you think you can play, but your body just has other ideas, and it sucks because as a competitor, that fire never leaves you, and you want to go out there and you want to be the best, and you were once the best, and now you don't have that same athleticism anymore, and it's just tough. It is really tough, and Tuukka Rask was one of the most polarizing athletes in Boston sports for many years.
Yep.
And even with that being said, it just sucks to see him go out this way. It really does. Now, I do think the Bruins did him a little bit of a disservice by not letting him play the games in Providence. I think we would have been able to get a better gauge of, what his status was. But I think in a way, this may be potentially good for him because I do think it was mentally taxing on him to play goalie for the Bruins because he was such a polarizing figure. I don't want to speak for him, obviously, but I do think, it did catch up with him a little bit because, there were Tuukka Rask fans, but the Tuukka Rask haters were often extremely loud. And I think at some point that wears on you.
Yep.
Like I said, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan, but I do really feel for the guy because it's hard when your body tells you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought this was going to be his last year anyway, so Yeah, but I really would have liked to have seen him kind of more go out on his own terms than this, where he's just, the body is saying, no, I can't do this anymore. He had a great career, was a great goaltender. Obviously, came up a little short in the playoffs as a starter, and there will certainly be a very loud faction of Bruins fans that will never let him forget that, and are very vocal about Tuca Rask and their dislike for him. But he was a great goaltender for many years in the league. He just never was able to win that cup as a starter. He was obviously the backup in 2011, but he couldn't. He never got it done as a starting goaltender. But it's just really sad to see it have to end this way. That's certainly never what you want with a guy going out because of an injury, especially at only 34 years old. It's not like he's 40. I mean, this is a guy who's was going to be retiring early anyway. All the talk about retirement with him was coming in his mid 30s, when a lot of times goalies play into like 38, 39, 40. So it was looking like he was going to be an early retiree anyway, and now it gets cut even more short. That's just really, really sad.
And when you think about when he started playing, how old was he? 18, 20?
Oh,
So I remember he was involved in the Raycroft deal.
yeah, drafted at
Yeah.
18. He hadn't played yet when he was traded, but he was involved in the Raycroft deal that sent Raycroft to Toronto and Rask here. And I don't know how old he was when he first started playing in Boston, but I would probably say early 20s.
So that's still, let's just say, for numbers' sake, a 10-year career. That's a solid career. I mean, it's a solid career in one of the biggest hockey markets that has, a lot of pressure, and he was able to handle most of the outside noise. Pressure on the ice, like John said, in terms of the big moments, he didn't always deliver, but he was able to give the Bruins stability at the goaltender position. Whatever you thought of the results, he was always somebody that you would be able to see in net.
Yeah, he made his NHL debut in 2007, 2008. So he would have been right around 20 years old when he made his NHL debut. 2009, 2010 was his first year. Was his first year in Boston, really playing a full-time NHL schedule. He started 39 games that year. So obviously he would have been 23, 22, 23 that season. But yeah, he was a really good goaltender for a long time. You're looking at from 2009, 2010, all the way through last season. He played a lot of games, played over 500 career games, get over 300 career wins, a 921 career save percentage, which is right near Dominik Hasek's all-time save percentage, which everyone talks about. Dominik Hasek is one of the greatest goaltenders of all time. Well, when you look at save percentage numbers, Rask finishes his career now with a 921, and Hasek had a 922. So
Some
that
good
just
company
kind of
right there.
shows you how good Rask was in the regular season for so many years. 2.28 goals against average, which was obviously phenomenal. He had a really, really good career. It's just unfortunate that he's not going to get to go out on his own terms and go out with that one last shot at a cup that he was hoping for this year.
And truthfully, I don't think he would have gotten it this year.
I don't think he
mean,
was going to win this year either, but he wanted that. He wanted
he
that
did.
chance.
He did, and I don't blame him. And now we have to see the future. What can the future do? What can Swayman do?
Yep.
And it's a lot of pressure to put on his shoulders, but it's something that I think he can handle. Can he play better against big teams? I think that's something he's definitely going to work on and grow into. But now we're going to see, what he can do on a larger scale. He is now going to be the full-time number one goaltender for the future, and it's a lot of pressure to play in Boston, and I really hope he can do it for the entire season. He's shown flashes in certain games, and he's played really well for certain stretches, but now it's no longer going to be X amount of games or a stretch. It's going to be an entire season.
Yeah, see, that's where, we both had the positives and negatives of the Bruins bring Rask back originally. But the biggest positive for me when that signing took place was the depth and the goaltending depth, that you now had three goalies. You had three goalies that you could trust, and if anything were to happen to one of the top two guys, you had a third goalie that could come in and be reliable. Well, now with Rask probably not coming back and not gonna be retiring, then you're back to two goaltenders. And now what happens if Ullmark gets hurt? What happens if Swayman gets hurt? What if one of these guys, pulls a groin or tweaks a knee or something like that? Troy Grosnick isn't going to cut it. I'm sorry, but Troy Grosnick isn't going to cut it as your third goalie. Like, Boston would then be almost forced into making a goalie move, because they would need somebody that could be reliable, that would come in and play some games.
I think you might see one down the road because two goaltenders is not good in terms of depth and and even to some level experience, because that's what you're going to need for the playoffs. Now we've all made our thoughts clear about the playoffs on this show, but you still have to general manage and make moves as if you're preparing for a Stanley Cup run.
Exactly.
And the Bruins need to make a move for another goaltender in some fashion. What that move is going to look like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but they're going to have to. I mean, I don't think, you've got to have some sort of organizational depth in goal, where if Swayman was to tweak a knee or something and miss 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I mean, Ullmark can't start every game. You got to have a backup for him. So, or if, the other way around, if Ullmark was to get hurt and miss 4 to 6 weeks, then you got to have somebody to go along with Swayman. So, that puts them in a situation where they need to, I don't know who, but they need to find some sort of, cheap option, like maybe maybe not these players specifically, but players like like a Keith Kincaid or a Scott Wedgwood or someone like that, who's kind of been a career backup slash like tweener between the AHL and NHL. But they need somebody with some NHL experience to be the third goalie, not Troy Grosnick.
I agree. And, I'll be interested to see what they do. This is going to be another test for Boston, as if they are not going to deal with enough tests in the coming weeks here. But it's going to be really interesting to see who they bring in and if they bring anybody in. I think they should, but just because we think the Bruins management should do something doesn't mean that they listen to us. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, goaltending situation is now back to kind of being a question. Obviously, it's going to be Ullmark and Swayman as your 1-2 combo again without Rask, but what do you do for a third goalie now? Because I think you can't go into the playoffs not having a reliable third goaltender. Otherwise, I mean, you're done at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about depth in the playoffs. We've talked about it a lot, and goaltending was once a strength for the Bruins. Now it's a little bit uneven. It's not the worst, obviously. Like you said, we still have Swayman and Ullmark, but you want to kind of reinforce the position, and I'll be intrigued to see what they do and how they address it, because, like I said, you have to prepare like you're going for a big run in the playoffs, so you definitely need a body to fill out that third spot.
Definitely. All right, so one final segment, I guess, here. Want to look ahead to the upcoming schedule, which is not an easy one for the Bruins, but if we look at their rest of this week and next week for Boston, they got Carolina on Thursday. They've got Ottawa on Saturday at Ottawa, and the Senators have been playing teams really tough. They actually just beat the Hurricanes last night. Then they get a couple days off. They go to New York to play the Rangers, who are having a great season this year and have already beaten the Bruins once. Then they have to go to Long Island and play at UBS Arena against the New York Islanders next Thursday, the 17th. So these next 4 games, this is not an easy stretch for the Bruins. Very tough games, especially against the Rangers and Hurricanes. and also against Ottawa and the Islanders, who are not great teams but play very hard, and I think are going to certainly not make it easy on the Bruins. And you could potentially be doing this without Brad Marchand, likely without Brad Marchand at the very least, and possibly without Patrice Bergeron as well. This could be a bad stretch.
So that's a total of what? How many points?
4 games, 8 possible points.
2 with the only points coming against Ottawa.
Wow.
That is my prediction, especially if that Marchand suspension
Yep.
comes into play here, and we don't know what happens with Bergeron either. Once we find out more about Bergeron, that may change, but I honestly see 2 points with those coming against Ottawa. I think this is going to be one of the roughest stretches of the Bruins season.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I definitely think they lose to Carolina. I think
Yep.
Ottawa is still a winnable game, even though the Sens are playing really well right now. They can't afford to lose to Ottawa because I think they also lose to the Rangers.
Yep.
And then I think they should at least get a point. They may lose in OT to the Islanders, but they should get a point, I would think. I'm gonna go with at least 1 point against the Islanders. I'm gonna give them 3. I'm going to give them 3 points over this next stretch.
Okay, I can see it. I just feel like the Islanders always bring their
They
A
play the
game when they
Bruins
play
really
Boston.
tough.
So 2 and 3 points. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement for this next week here, but it's going to be a tough stretch, and I think it's going to be a rough couple weeks here. Because didn't you say they play Colorado the following week? Or
yeah, Colorado's coming up on February 21st.
Ugh. Oh boy, I might have to drink a few during those games for sure.
Yeah, that's probably not going to be a great one either, but we'll have to see.
Make the pain go away.
We got to see what these final determination here is with how long Marchand and Bergeron are going to be out. Like if Bergeron doesn't miss that much time, that's obviously going to be a big help for the Bruins. Yeah. Marchand is looking at a 5+ game suspension. Like they don't just offer in-person hearings unless they're going to suspend you for more than 5 games. So this could be a lengthy absence for Brad Marchand here coming up. And the Bruins are in big trouble without him.
Yeah, they are in major trouble without him, and it's going to be up to the depth players to step it up, but it almost seems like the Bruins were unprepared for this situation, and you should always have some sort of plan A and plan B and things like that. And again, that's where the organizational depth comes into play. But yeah, I see this as being a rough stretch, and maybe a rough show next week if once we come back, and you may not want to hear us talk as much, and we won't blame you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have high hopes here. I'm not optimistic heading into this next stretch, especially with everything that happened last night. I am not optimistic at all. So we'll have to see how it goes. But this is not an easy schedule, and you could have a couple of major pieces. I mean, literally like 2 of your 3 most important players out of the lineup. I'm going to say the 3 most important players for the Bruins are Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, and Patrice Bergeron. And to have potentially 2 of those 3 out of the lineup, that's going to be devastating for the Bruins.
I'll be interested to see how David Pastrnak handles this stretch here, because that's going to be a lot of pressure to put on him in terms of scoring, and we know he can do it, but
he did everything last night. Yeah. I mean, he scored both goals for the Bruins. He had 2 goals in the first period, and nobody else could give him any sort of help.
You know who else had 2 goals last night? Was Dan Heinen.
Dan Heinen for Pittsburgh, but coming back to bite his old team.
They always seem to do that, don't they?
They seem to do that.
They always seem to do that. It's like one more middle finger to the Bruins.
One last little ha-ha at his former team as he's 2 goals in 28 seconds for him.
I miss him, and I miss Noel Acciari. I
miss Noel Acciari. Yeah, he's been hurt this year, unfortunately, but I absolutely loved Acciari.
I did too, and again, it's another
Providence
case where,
College alum.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruins make another tough move, and
I think they should have kept Acciari over Corrali.
I agree.
I would have rather had Acciari than Corrali.
I agree, But we all know that the Bruins aren't exactly best at managing personnel. But before we get off into another tangent, I will just leave it at that.
Yeah, all right. So that's going to bring us to the end here of episode 54. Danny, once again, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to talk to you. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of good things to talk about today, but we still got a pretty long conversation in here about the Bruins.
It's never boring around here, is it? Never boring. So at
That's
least you
for
got
sure.
that.
All right, everybody, once again, big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show is in partnership with them and would not be happening without them. So thank you to Mark and everybody there for all of the support. Don't forget about the links down in the description of the video. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel, NHL apparel from any of the 32 teams, or NCAA college apparel, please check out those links in the description. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But that's going to bring us to the end here of episode 54. We recorded on Wednesday. You guys will be seeing this on Friday. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, I think Danny and I have made our opinions very well known today. We do not have high hopes for what's going to happen here, with Marchand likely being suspended for a lengthy amount of time, and the possibility of Bergeron missing games as well with an injury. So that could spell a lot of trouble, and this could be a really tough stretch for the Bruins, who are trying to hold on to a playoff spot. Luckily, have a pretty decent cushion as far as being in a spot, but are probably going to be stuck in that second wildcard spot the way it's looking.
Yep, and it's going to be an interesting week here, and we may have a lot to talk about next week too. But
Yeah, we will be back next week with episode 55, and we'll see what we have to talk about. Hopefully it's better news than we're expecting, but we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Very, very much appreciated. And we'll talk to you soon. Hopefully you have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week with episode 55. Thanks so much.